So we are recording this meeting. We are recording the speaker view now. And I'm so glad you came to us, Linda Blade, Dr. Linda Blade. You wrote a book about transgender inclusion into female sport, and it's destroying sport. And we're so happy that you are willing to talk about it, especially since we had this Laurel Hubbard who showed the whole world what's going to happen when men can enter in female sports. So this book, well, it took some time, of course, to write, but when was the first time you noticed there was something going on with this trans inclusion into women's sport? When did you find out it was going to be a problem?
I found out in January of 2018. So what happened was I had been a coach for most of my career, and just working on the ground with the athletes, enjoying, just being out there in the sun and the rain and the snow and just working with the athletes. And but all of a sudden, in 2014, I was elected as the president of the board of directors for the Athletics Association, the Track and Field Association of Alberta, which is my home province in Canada. And so as part of the policy development and requirement for that role, I was at a meeting, a national meeting for Canadian Sports, Athletics Canada in 2018. And then I was put on a gender committee. They wanted us to actually study this very serious new policy they were trying to enact and across Canada. And so I took a look, and they put me on this committee because very few women are presidents of sports associations. So they put me as like the token woman on this sports association, or on this committee, gender committee. And so I looked at the document, I was studying it, and my heart just dropped because I have my PhD in biology. I have been a coach all my life. I do know the difference between male and female in a very tangible, very real way. Even my PhD studies were on physical anthropology, like the growing bodies, size, shape, proportion, composition, gross function of the growing body. So children, youth, and into adults, and how that relates to athleticism, how that relates to the function. So form and function. And all of it was about, there was nothing you could study in that, realm without actually understanding that there's male bodies and there's female bodies. And then, of course, when I was at the table talking about these policies, I said, it's just not possible. This just can't be happening. And when I looked around the table at all the men sitting at the table and said, like, are you kidding me? Like, this can't be true. Like, what are we doing here? And they would just simply not acknowledge the truth. Like they would look at their hands and just shrug, like, well, it's going to be the law. What are we supposed to do? As if it's already law. Like, I just thought, it's not the law yet. It can't be the law yet. And so, yeah, that sent me right into the rabbit hole, and this whole parallel universe. I call it the parallel universe of gender, the world, the universe in which sex doesn't matter, and somehow we're all imagining these things.
Well, I would like to know, what kind of sports did you train? What kind of athletes did you train?
Yes.
So we get were they all female? Are they males?
Mm-hmm. So I am in track and field athletics primarily. That's my foundation. Mm-hmm. But track and field is kind of like the alphabet of sports. So running, jumping, throwing, these are all things that pertain to many sports. So that's why I would say track and field is also recognized as the core sport of the Olympic Games, because all games in the world have these, more or less, most of the games in the world have running, jumping, and throwing. And then you add strategy, tactics to those. Like if you're playing basketball, then you run, you jump, you throw, but then you have rules and it's a strategy. So because of that, because I have a PhD in sports science, because because I have, I would say, a professional development as a coach, and because I was an athlete myself and understand the sport of track and field athletics, I was able to apply these foundational principles of human movement to athletes by now in 17 different sports. So my profession is, I meet with the athlete, I find out what they're missing to be a good athlete in their sport. And usually it has something to do with their fundamental movement skills. So then I can take them from, let's say it's a figure skater, I can take them from the ice after they're come off the ice, and then maybe I can help them to jump higher with some drills on the land. So I'm doing specialty fitness that targets the specific needs of each athlete, no matter what age, from beginners like 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, all the way to professional athletes. I've had so many, I've had hundreds of athletes, maybe even more than 1,000 athletes over my last 30 years of employment as a, my own business, as a private sport performance consultant. And I've never run into anything but a male and a female. I'm sorry, there's nothing in between.
But you did coach both.
I did coach, and I do. I coach professional males athletes in the hockey NHL. I've coached professional men in, football, in North American football. I've coached pairs figure skaters, so the man and the woman, and they're skating together. I have coached, I have coached rugby players, male and female. Just everything. I have helped with many, many different sports, male and female swimmers. Because, even when you're swimming, when you make the turn and you push off the wall, that's a jump. That's a power thing. Mm-hmm. And so we can actually find ways, to make those legs stronger and how you push. So this is those little things that you have to change or improve to just get that extra, 0.1 of a second or millimeter or whatever. We're talking very small improvements that can make a difference between making the final and making a gold medal.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was very sensitive when even we were being told in Canada, oh, well, there's only 12% difference in running between men and women. Why does it matter? 12%. I mean, I'm talking 0.1, 0.01, like, these are the areas that I work in these little percentages to make an athlete more successful. If you tell me some woman comes up who's like, an intersectional feminist, who's also supporting this crazy madness of letting males into women's sports and we should all be so nice, and she tells me, oh, it's only 12% difference, what's the big deal? That's like saying, what's the difference between Earth and Mars? Like, it's so big, the difference, that it just seems ridiculous to me. These people aren't even thinking. They don't know anything about sports.
No, and you know a lot about sports.
I know a lot about sports.
So you're the person to talk to about this inclusion of male-bodied people into female sports.
For sure, sure.
So you found out in January 2018, and where did it went from there? Where did it go from there?
Yeah, so I even had private meetings. I invited some male leaders to dinner, took them out to a restaurant, tried to talk sense into these people and say, like, what I'm saying is the truth. Like, this policy, you can't be serious. Like, just talk to me privately, then tell me what you really think, And always these people, especially the men, just sort of acting like I'm the one who's out of order. I'm the one that needs to accept this. I should just be kind. And so the next step for me was going to the document that was being pushed on the Canadian sports associations like mine was a document coming from the Canadian anti-doping. There's a bureaucracy that kind of is being, gets government funding to make sure Canadians athletes don't cheat. So it's the anti-cheating bureaucracy of the sports ministry, or not really within the sport ministry, but somehow a not for profit, but it's being funded by the government to tell us all not to cheat. So it's called the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sports, CCES. And I noticed that it was their 2016 document where it had these crazy, crazy things. And that was new for them too in that year, because all up until, between like from the cheating times of the 1980s and 90s and doping times until 2012, 13 or so, all of the only focus of that group was anti-doping. Like it was never anything else. Fair play, always fair play. And then all of a sudden they're pushing male bodies, us to accept that there's male bodies that can self-identify as women and magically become females. And this is like so much worse than doping, because, doping only gives you a 9%, 10% advantage. But if you're a male body in a women's sport, and in some cases, like sports that are strength oriented, for example, they could be up to 50% advantage for a male body to self-identify. So they were telling me in this document from the ethics people that doping is still bad. So 10% advantage is bad, but a 50% male advantage coming into women's sport is somehow very good, and somehow we should be accepting. So I actually called the president of the CCES, or the CEO, I should say. And I said to the man's name is Paul Melia, and I was literally on the phone with him by May 2018, just late May, early June. But I was on the phone with him and I said, Paul, can we talk about this document, this policy you're trying to push? Like, do you not see the absurdity of this? Like, how let's just, I'm not going to believe that a man can become a woman. So can you not see what I'm saying? That if it's really a male body, which it is in women's sport, it's going to be a catastrophe. And he had, like this, it was almost like a prayer sheet, we believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Then he would say, he would switch diversity, equity, and inclusion, safety, equity, and inclusion. So he kept using these terms, and everything I said as an argument, he just repeated the words safety, equity, and inclusion. And I said, but wait, stop, just stop, please. It's not safe, because in a contact sport, women are going to get hurt. So you can't be about safety. It's not inclusive, because if a man is in a woman's sport, it's excluding a woman, but automatically somebody doesn't get to do, be on the podium or do the sport. Like Laurel Hubbard is excluding somebody because there's only so many spots in the Olympic Games. So Laurel Hubbard is literally excluding somebody. No matter who else they let in, the fact that Laurel Hubbard is there is excluding a woman from her own category. And then finally, it's not equitable in any way. So you can't say this is about safety, equity, and inclusion. It has nothing to do with that. So when I said all of that, he said, yeah, you're being a bigot. It's just, we believe in safety, equity, inclusion. He just kept saying it. So I said, listen, wait. I said, I know that you're not going to admit anything to me about reality here. So just tell me one last thing before I hang up the telephone. Can you please just tell me, because I really don't know, is this already the law in Canada? Or are you actually just making a very strong recommendation? Like my association, do I have a choice still as to whether to adopt your policy, or can I make my own policy? Is this the law? And he said, well, it's not the law yet. So, when he said not the law yet, everything kind of almost panicked, because I felt like, knowing how this government in Canada has pushed really terrible laws and legislation without proper consultation, like Bill C-16 pronouns that Jordan Peterson was talking about, it happened no matter what anybody said, they just pushed the law in. So then my next thought was, well, how much time do I have? Like if he says it's not the law yet, do I have 1 year to argue? Do I have 2 years to argue? when is this going to become the law? Because the minute it becomes a law, then I am in a position where my position, my policies in our association, which are biology based, will become illegal, and a person could suffer legal consequences for having those positions. So I really need to know. And nobody could tell me, of course, at that point. So I tried a little bit more to talk to the men in, who I knew were in leadership around in my area. Nothing was changing. And the sad thing to me, Caroline, is that they did a very smart thing. They went to the women's group that was supposed to be protecting women's sports. And they got the women, the intersectional feminist group, like the Canadian Women in Sport, they got them to be the spokespeople for this policy. Mm-hmm. And those women were also arguing the same thing. So I had no help from them. So my next thing was, well, surely that's kind of when I found out about the IOC, because as soon as I found out I had no friends nationally, no support nationally, I thought, well, surely the IOC must have a standard policy about this. So then I go to the IOC policy and I find out this was done in 2015 with nobody explained this to us. This was all by stealth, by secret. I mean, I don't think the IOC was trying to keep it a secret, but they certainly weren't pronouncing what they were doing and in a way that would let women say anything. They did not consult females in sports. And so then I suddenly realized my brain just exploded, because then I thought, okay, I don't have anybody on my side high up in Canada. I even don't have anybody on my side internationally. Yet the sport that I'm involved with, in my province, we are where sport happens on the ground. The only thing standing between this bad policy up here and what's happening on the ground is us, because we are the provincial associations who literally run the competitions for them. So I realized I was the only one standing on the ground. So when I was making no progress with my argument, that's when I went onto Twitter and really started arguing hard, because I needed to find people who, if somebody must agree with what I'm saying. Like, I can't be going crazy here.
And who did you find on Twitter?
Oh, we are so, Twitter can be so awful, but seriously, Twitter saved my life in that moment, because I was tweeting things, I would react to arguments. Pretty soon, Fair Play for Women in UK started noticing my tweets. So I got a call from Nicola Williams in Fair Play for Women. It took about maybe 4 months, maybe by January of 2019. And so I was so thrilled, because to me, Fair Play for Women were amazing. Mm-hmm. And so to get a call from them was just, it's hard to understand how I was feeling that moment, but it was so great. And I just felt like, thank goodness there's something, some organization, something doing something about this. And then I got into a secret Facebook Messenger group, with Fair Play. And then in that group was Beth Stelzer, who started Save Women's Sports USA. So it put me in touch with the biology, sex-based rights, and then all of the sex-based rights groups. I started understanding what was going on, and CEDA and the international obligations of countries that they are required actually to recognize sex, biological sex, and and not discriminate on the basis of biology. So it sort of really pulled me into, I guess, a realm of life, quite frankly, that as a coach, I just never paid any attention to. So I'm quite grateful.
And when did you decide to write a book?
Well, so then of course my journey was set in front of me, because now I'm getting followers, and I got people talking to me, and then by about November, December 2019, so almost 2020, or actually was it, yeah, it was in that range. I suddenly realized that I was probably the only coach in Canada I could find that would say anything. In fact,
in the world,
even the world, like where are the coaches here? Our job as a coach, like me, in my case, I've been an athlete. That's a long backstory, but I was national champion, international teams. I had my turn. Now I'm a coach, and one of my duties is to protect the athletes and to actually make sure everything's correct. So I couldn't figure out, where are all the coaches here? What's going on? Why is everybody afraid? It's all obviously because they're worried for their jobs or their reputation, whatever. But there has to be more than me. Why is it only me being a coach who is speaking out? And so I decided I would like to write an op-ed in a newspaper. I tried a number of times to write something for Canadian newspapers, the standard legacy media kind of thing. Never went anywhere. And then one of my friends put me, I think Lisa Vespi of Cosbar, she kind of helped me get in touch with Barbara Kay. And Barbara Kay, journalist Barbara Kay, wonderful woman, who is my partner in crime. Her name is also on the book, Barbara Kay. She kind of, I sent her a draft of what I intended to write about the CCES, Canadian Center for Ethics in Sport, and the Canadian Women in Sport, and how they're basically traitors to women. And she allowed me to work on this document a little bit harder. And she was kind of a mentor in terms of, I'm a coach, I'm not a writer. So she kind of gave me some tips on making the document better. And so by February 2020, I published the op-ed in the Post Millennial. So anyway, I thought that was it. I thought, okay, I published, I said what I have to say, blah, blah, blah. And, I kept tweeting and stuff, but I guess by May, Barbara must have been talking to somebody, so people she knew in the publishing industry. And so by May 2020, so just a little over a year ago, in fact, it was early June. It was actually just a year and a month ago, Barbara contacted me and said, would you be interested in writing a book on this? Because I think that Rebel News, which is an outlet here in Canada, would be willing to publish. So obviously, it was obvious to me she had talked to Ezra Levant, who's the CEO of Rebel News, and I said to Barbara, I said, look, Barbara, I'm not officially a writer. I mean, I wrote my thesis, I wrote things, but I'm not a writer. I said, and really, honest to goodness, it was science journal writing. It wasn't writing that would maybe connect with parents and, like hockey dads, soccer moms, like a kind of writing that makes things interesting for people. I said to Barbara, I said, I don't know whether I could do it. I think it needs to get to that particular kind of audience, not too technical, just storytelling, how. And she says, well, don't worry, because if you can be the main author, if you actually write what's on your heart and in your mind, maybe I can help you sort of just shape the argument a little bit. And that's when I said immediately, yes, this must happen. And what a luxury, because even though I'm not a writer and I've never tried to publish anything in a regular book, the idea that you could just immediately have a publisher who wants you to write something, and know for sure that it can get there. And I realized, I'm still feeling this panic about, it's going to be the law soon, I have to say something. So, just the not panic, but just the urgency, this feeling like we have maybe 1 year or 2 years left just to make sense of what's going on and maybe get people to understand what's at stake. And so, so I welcomed the partnership with Barbara. I was in fact quite astonished that she would be willing to help, some coach, just some coach on the ground. Like, she's a great journalist. Like, what's she doing with me?
Well,
And
you're a
so,
great coach, obviously.
yeah, but she didn't know that about any, like, she knew I was a coach. She didn't know too much about my background. So she took a chance on me too. And I was very cognizant of the fact that it was a privilege to be working with her, that I needed to step up and show some leadership, that I needed to actually make sure this happened in a timely manner and not mess around. And of course, luckily we were in COVID lockdown, so I had all the time in the world.
Hmm. Because
So
writing a book in a
had no
year is
excuse.
fast.
I had no excuse. In fact, I thought I could do it in 4 months because it was like, I
Hmm.
knew all the arguments. But there was a lot of things I didn't know about publishing, clearly. But I have to say, Barbara was very good at letting me say what I have to say and letting me lead the arguments. So she could fine tune a little bit. And there's one part of the book about the watching the gatekeepers that I have incorporated quite a bit of her writing from previous times.
Yeah.
But really, it really is truly my information that she helped me. She kind of pulled it out of me. She kept asking me more questions. At first, it was only 6 chapters. And she kept pushing, like, I think there's more over here. You need to talk a little bit more about this. And then I tried to make it too sort of chatty at first, like just trying to sort of talk to the moms and dads. And she said, no, maybe it can be a little more technical than that. Like, just make it. So I guess between the two of us, I hope, and I don't know if you agree, but I hope we found a happy medium between providing rock solid pieces of information on policy, but in a way that's storytelling style, so that it doesn't bore people to death. Like, my worry was it would just bore everybody to death. Because when you're talking about policy, it's just boring from a lot of people.
Well, I didn't think the book was boring at all. It was very interesting because it's like it's a weird story.
Yeah.
It's really a weird story. How did this happen? And what I found very interesting was the rugby federation that decided to not allow male-bodied athletes in female competition. So why is it so different in the Olympics and in rugby? Is there a difference between how did they come to the different conclusion?
Yeah, that is a really good question, Caroline. Really good question. I think if you follow the journey from 2015, when the International Olympic Committee, first made this decision and called it's a consensus document or whatever statement. They said, let's just review what it says. Their position was that a male-born person, male, can identify as a woman for the purposes of competing against female athletes there's two things. If they live as a woman, well, they have to self-declare and live as a woman for a year. So that's kind of like one, all wrapped up into one. Self-declaration and living as a woman for a year, whatever that means. And we know that's ridiculous because it's just a bunch of stereotypes. But anyway, live as a woman for a year, and then keep the hormone levels of testosterone down below 10 nanomoles per liter for that year. Now, the problem with even that statement is, who's testing this person 24 hours a day? Like, even if they only test once a month, you can, as Dr. Emma Hilton has pointed out, there's certain testosterone suppressant drugs where you can take that drug and within 12 hours, your testosterone level goes down to 0 level, to castration level, you could do it just for the test. And then the minute your test is over, go live as a man again without worrying about your testosterone levels. And then go to the next month, another test, boom, hormone level goes down take the test, show your certificate, live as a man for another month. Like, how they don't have an implanted chip that is monitoring them 24/7. So how would they know anyway? And besides all that, well, then let's talk about rugby, because I think a lot of the sport groups were just trying to accept this policy between 2015 and let's say 2018. They were just trying to accept it. And then you can see the problem with World Rugby, because rugby is the contact sport where women are going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And of course, I think, and I have to verify this, but I think in rugby, the official who officiates the match, like the referee, that person is also liable if somebody gets hurt. Like, it's about insurance and liability to some degree, like for the actual official involved. So I think World Rugby started to realize, oh no, like we have a big problem here. We're going to have people getting injured. We don't know whether this policy from the IOC was in any way considered, like well considered as far as putting us at risk in our sport, right? So then thank goodness World Rugby has in its ranks one of the most amazing sports scientists in the world is Ross Tucker. And of course, he was very keen to do an honest scientific investigation and the proper steps to test these ideas. And so I believe it was in the fall of 2019 that World Rugby decided to do something that the IOC failed to do. And the IOC should have convened a large panel of proponents for transgender inclusion and advocates for women. They should have included everybody in a massive conference at the table, present your case, present your evidence, discuss, okay? IOC did not do that in the lead up to its policy. IOC only accepted, they did not review what was going on in a scientific way. They adopted only one set of arguments and from trans community. And so we could talk about that later, but let me finish the World Rugby. So then the World Rugby Federation decided we're just going to do it the right way. We're going to convene a panel. So we'll have all the people from every side of the argument around the table, and we're going to have specific steps and gather all of the evidence. So all sides of this debate have to show their scientific evidence for the arguments they're making and justify their position on the policy. So they had their final meeting in, I think it was February 2020. So just about a month before COVID lockdown, they had this big meeting where all the people were at the table. So fortunately for us, we had superstars like Dr. Emma Hilton and Dr. Nicola Williams from Fair Play for Women and Dr. John Pike. We had, and Ross Tucker was involved just as, for World Rugby, just looking on. But, we had some very strong advocates from our side arguing and presenting the data, which was fantastic. And the trans side had Dr. Joanna Harper, who was the one who had produced some really terrible data back before the 2015 IOC decision that seemed to somehow convince people on the medical commission. I don't know how in the world it did that, so we can talk about that. But to finish the World Rugby story, when they convened in that meeting, the idea was that they would then have this mountain of all of the studies that have been done. Let's say if you take a group of males who want to transition, you measure their strength before they transition, measure afterwards, and see what the difference is. Once they actually got all that data together, then all the studies and those data, then they basically had another meeting and privately within World Rugby led by Ross Tucker, looking at the data. And they really basically came up with their argument, their final there in the fall, like I think it was October, in October of 2020 was when World Rugby made the announcement that at the elite level, male bodies would not be allowed to self-identify into women's sports because that was what the data told them. That was what the science was on. There's not a single study that says the strength goes down more, anywhere close to the women's level. So they know that having a man in that game, having one male body in a game on the field is going to raise the possibility of any number of women having 20 to 30% increase in possible injuries to the head, the neck, the back, possible paralysis, possible death. So why would rugby say they would be allowed to? But the problem was that the national rugby teams or units, like the national rugby leagues, like Rugby USA, Rugby Canada, Rugby Australia, they were still at that point where they were trying to virtue signal, and they then went against they are speaking out against the World Rugby decision. And World Rugby knew that was what would happen because there was already a lot of lobbying before they made the announcement. And so World Rugby basically, when they said that elite women's rugby would not be allowed, males would not be allowed in elite rugby, they also said, but each national rugby team or unit can do what they want. They can allow men and women's sports in the national game or the community leagues. So that was kind of like their concession to transactivism, so that they wouldn't have a complete revolt on their hands from all of the people who were trying to push this agenda. So World Rugby did not help in some ways. If they would have, for me, it would have been fine to just say, at the world level, we only speak about our international competitions and never make a statement about why they said they would be allowed at the lower levels. They should have just left it, because by saying it's allowing them to, like, men to be in women's rugby at the lower levels, I think it actually hurts the international women's game, because what's going to happen is if you have too many males at ground level, the girls walk away. So all of your talent, half of your talent walks away in women's rugby, even at that level, so that by the time you get to the top and now you only accept the female bodies that remain are half of the talent pool as before. So basically I feel you're diluting your talent for the elite game if you actually don't, because athletes don't suddenly come to the Olympics without a background. Everybody comes to the Olympics, what I call through the athlete factory. It's long-term athlete development, where you start, where the children come into the door, and then all the coaches work with them inside the factory, in a sense, all through the age groups. And then the way world sport is basically constructed at this point is coaches like me on the ground, we work inside the factory. We pass athletes, a development athlete sometimes goes to the next coach, or sometimes I'm working on the beginner part of the factory or the near to the top, like of the competition, national championships, and sometimes outside. But what I think happens is the way the IOC and the international sports federations, it's like they are standing. So let's say in sport of track and field, the International Olympic Committee and World Athletics, it's like two CEOs, like two really wealthy men standing at the door of the factory with their fingers crossed, hoping for the next Ferrari to come out so they can make their money. Right? And so what I'm saying is, for World Rugby, they'll be standing at the door like this, hoping for good players to come out of the national, like the community soccer factories, as far as athletes. And now all of a sudden they won't see as many good women. They'll have to stand there and go, okay, well, we've let all the males go through the female division inside the factory. And now when they come out the door, then we're going to have to put the females over here, and we accept those, but the males have to go and just, not be allowed. But if you don't say it from the beginning, then you don't develop the female game.
Yeah, I understand. So
So basically, I didn't get back now to the origins of the IOC decision. And it's quite a long story, but let me just make it short. Let me just say, starting around 2000, or 2001, they had decided to allow transsexuals who had undergone the surgery and lived as women and taken testosterone for years, like 3 or 4 years. There was a very high bar, like a very, very tight gate that these, trans people had to get through, trans males who were transsexual had to wait up to 3 years with full treatment, complete surgery, to be able to justify even thinking they could go into the women's game. And so that was, in those days, it's like what, everybody says now, it's like that, well, surely, I'm sure the IOC leaders thought, well, that won't be so bad. There won't be that many then. If that's a high requirement, there won't be that many. And they were right. There weren't that many, but there were some. But then, because of gender ideology creeping out and becoming big time, more and more males who are transgender, who don't want to undergo the surgery, they are starting then to want to be in women's sports. And so they didn't want to have to undergo the surgery. They didn't want to have to take all the testosterone, like the hormonal treatments. So then comes along Joanna Harper, who's just a recreational runner, pretty good runner, but as a male, just pretty average, long distance runner. Also, it just happens to be, like some sort of a lab technician or PhD or something, but in radiology, has not much to do with sports sciences. But this person knew the language of science. So they just did an ad hoc personal study. Because of social media, starting around 2006 and 2007, Joanna Harper decided to go on social media, just try to find, some runners who were self-identifying and who may have taken some hormonal treatment to identify as women. And so just ad hoc data, like just through 3 years of just chatting and making friends online, Joanna Harper decided that, he found 8 runners, including himself, who had run in their 20s and then decided to transition and then had run times later in their life. And it turns out that the times they were running later in life after hormone replacement therapy were quite a bit lower than the times they did as young men. Like, surprise, surprise. Like, it could be anything. It could be age. It could be your lifestyle. Your body changes over time. Of course, taking HRT was probably part of it. And so what Joanna Harper did was take these 8 runners and compare them to age graded female athletes and say, see, our times are about the same as the females of our age. So this is proof that we have lowered, with our treatment of hormones, we have lowered our capacity to the female level. And that was only 8. So there was not even a peer review. You couldn't do official statistical analysis. It was just averages. And in my book, as you saw, I covered this, where the one athlete, the one runner, number 7, subject number 7, got better with age. So including that person in the marathon. So that person's time, if they had included, if Joanna Harper had included that runner's time in the analysis, it would have shown that the male advantage persists. But that couldn't be, that they did all this work, and Joanna Harper wanted to prove, I guess, that the running times of male athletes with hormone treatment goes down, gets rid of the 10 or 12% difference between men and women. So just, there's a little asterisk there. They just excluded that data point.
Oh, well, that's not science.
So it's not science.
That's not science. That's not scientifical
So, but the IOC so that was the study the IOC looked at to determine their 2015 policy. So now, just recently, I started this website called N=8, because that's our little protest that it took 8 male runners of recreational runners to change all the rules of sport in the world for all the women and all the sports. So they took the data from these 8 runners and applied it to other sports that have other things like strength, coordination. So they use that one stupid study. I mean, they haven't shown us any other data that they use. We know they use that study. So until the IOC tells us what else they use, the only conclusion we can draw is on the basis of 8 recreational male runners, you changed the rules of sport for billions, like for millions of women around the world, for all the women in the world. Like, how misogynistic is that? It's incredible.
Yeah, but nobody does anything about it besides you.
Well,
and Save Women's Sports and
fair play. Yeah, and fair play for women. And now there's Save Women's Sports Australasia. So there's Catherine Deves. So we got Beth Stelzer in the States. We have Catherine Deves in Australia. She's a lawyer. She's very much now started to argue very well at the national level. We have Rowena Edge in New Zealand, who's obviously right in the middle of this hurricane because of Laurel Hubbard, trying to argue. And she's actually got a lot of athletes and coaches in New Zealand starting to speak up. I think, Caroline, what's happening is it's just, you know how you cut your finger and then it takes a while and then it bleeds. So I think in the sense of policy, the cut happened in 2015. The bleeding starts in 2021. And I think there's going to be a lot of activism starting to happen.
So what do you think we need to do? Because do the women on weightlifting team in the Olympics need to leave their weights down and just protest, or what can we do to influence this ridiculous policy?
Okay, so here's my hesitancy on boycotts, and I will say why. Mm-hmm. When I trained for 4 or 8 years to be at a competition and to be at something like the Olympic Games, where my entire life's dream is to be there. For me to have to say no just because, like, maybe there's one guy, yes, it's not fair to the woman who was replaced, but athletes have a hard time because the moment an athlete does that, their sports life is over. It's like saying the thief wants to come into your house. So this is, to me, how I see boycott. Mm-hmm. It is an important tool at the right time when there's probably enough of let's say half the field would be males. I mean, at some point women would just stop. But when there's only 1 or 2, it's like saying you're in your house and there's a thief at your door. And you're supposed, and they know where the gold is, so they're going to go steal your gold. And the instruction is go and sit out on your lawn and just let him go take the gold. Like, it just seems like it's a difficult thing to ask the female athletes to do, because I do agree that at some point it's going to come to this. It's going to come to a boycott when it's enough, like when it's, I guess, bad enough. But the first thing that we need to do is make the IOC and our sport leadership accountable, because it's the leaders that are doing this. Mm-hmm. Because Laurel Hubbard would not be in there if the leaders weren't allowing it. So the focus is, boycott, yes, as far as like if we boycotted the whole Olympics or boycotted the companies that are sponsoring the Olympics, like the people who are taking advantage of the situation and making a lot of money, like those guys standing at the door of the factory hoping for the Ferrari to come out so they can make their money. yeah, I think we've got to do something where we can either boycott their products or boycott these people, or write letters like, do what this last weekend I saw in the UK was this amazing, and you guys have I think you ladies have done it too, but there's amazing protest in front of the New Zealand embassy. Just don't let them forget that they're doing this to the women. When we think that women's Olympic sport is finished, then I think boycott is right, because we need to be in a position where we say, we're not doing it your way anymore, we're going to do our way. The problem is we don't have our way set up yet. Like, there are women, and including me, if it comes to it, who might be ready to start a new women's international sports federation where we don't do the Olympics like we used to. Like women had our own, the International Women's Federation of Sports did exist. We had our own Olympics in 1922, 1926, 1930, and 1934. We had our own Olympics. And it was the men who were so angry that we were filling stadiums. Women, the public wanted to see women compete. And we were very successful on our own. And then the Olympic Games, they wanted to have the monopoly. And so they let the women come in track and field in 1928. So basically, and that was covered in the book too. But my point is, at some point, it doesn't work for us anymore. And when it doesn't work for women anymore, maybe it shows that the IOC was never acting in good faith with respect to women's sport and respecting women. And so maybe this is the final outcome that shows their true attitude. And maybe we do need to start a new international women's. The only way that's going to work, though, Caroline, is if we have some major sponsors where we can offer prize money that is better than the IOC, because I do believe in competition. I do believe that the way you could get female athletes over to a different thing would be to offer better coverage on the news, better coverage in terms of media, and higher prize money. And now the prize money might be the easiest thing in a way, because those gentlemen who are standing at the door of the factory hoping to make money off of whatever comes out of the factory, those gentlemen don't share it with the athletes. The IOC is making billions of dollars and they don't share it with the athletes. So even if we had a system where we would offer like athletes would be maybe stakeholders, shareholders in the money that is made, even some men would probably try to, I mean, we'd have to have very strict rules. We would have very strict rules, because a lot of the male athletes don't even get support. They don't get the money from the IOC. In fact, Joe Rogan, like the top podcaster in the world, Joe Rogan, continues to talk about how gross the IOC is manipulating and using athletes to make billions of dollars. And the athletes are sitting there eating, basically they're almost homeless, just hoping to get a medal so that maybe they can get some exposure and some sponsorship. And then after they get even their medal, they walk away and they never get any kind of living stipend or any kind of massive professional pay from the Olympics.
So the Olympics change the whole sports to the better.
I think this is a point in history where we're going to look back and say, you know, that's where sports started to actually become a more financially accountable to the athletes.
Well, I would like to, you know, close us up for now, and because there are questions from the audience.
Yes.
So
okay.
I would open it up for the audience to ask their questions. So I will maybe make a remove us from the spotlight.
Yes. Okay. Let's ask. Let's find out.
We can see all the other participants. Sure. Because I think we're a bit round in our conversation. You say we have to protest, we have to write letters, we have to show ourselves, and we have to wait the whole thing out.
I don't think it's waiting. I think there are things we can do, like writing letters. In my n=8.com, n equals the number 8. So n, capital N equals, and then the number 8.com. if you write that in, you can see that there's things that like call to action, things that we can do. So it's actually, the equals has to be the word equals. So N equals, so big N, and then equals is a word, and then 8, the number 8.com.
I think dit. Maar
Yeah, like that. If you can look that up, we've just started to put things in there. I'm actually doing a draft template of letter that we can send to different organizations and things, and start basically just keep speaking to them, so that maybe there's a chance we can change within the structure we have right now. The current structure of world sport is probably not optimal, but it's, as far as, like I said, the payments and the treatment of athletes and that sort of thing, it's a different story. But at least for women, to not destroy what we have before we can build something different.
Okay. So I'll open it up for people to ask questions. Okay. Oh no, I'll leave you in the spotlight.
Oh, okay.
And I will get myself out.
Okay, sounds good.
So gallery. So you can. I have Niev Sebastian. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Sorry. Yeah. Please ask your question.
Hello from Spain.
Okay. Hi.
And I love your book and all your work, Linda. You know, in Spain, we follow you a lot, and we are fighting every day, the Spanish feminists, and we love you too, and all the women around the world. This horrible situation gives some good things. One of them is to meet all these marvelous women from around the world. So we are mutuals in Twitter, and I'm very involved with this topic.
Good.
I'm thinking about what we can do facing the Olympics in Twitter. Is just an idea. Maybe you have thought something similar, or somebody is thinking about this, but I think we can make a big campaign in Twitter internationally to agree in some hashtags. The Spanish women are prepared to be there and to push very strongly, because this horrible thing about Hubar is picking a lot of people. Some people who is very difficult to explain the whole thing is starting to understand. So I'm preparing my own actions. I will keep in touch with you and your organizations. I'm sure the Spanish women and all women around the world will be pushing these Olympics, because I've been studying a lot with your book, the situation, and I do agree. The Olympics have to be. The world has to see what is happening, and I think it's an opportunity. So I give you, well, I not give you, because I'm sure you are thinking about this yet, but any hashtag you and your organization approves, and it will be followed all around the world. And I think it's very important to be a little bit organized in this.
Yes.
And I'll write you this week or the other with my ideas. Thanks a lot, and love you.
Thank you, Niev.
Gracias. Adelante, adelante, adelante. Have to fight.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
So do you have ideas about hashtags? Is this already a thing?
One of my ideas you know, when in the last chapter of my book, it's Biden, the President Biden of the United States, you know, had skewed Title IX, which is their law to say that sex segregated sports should be honored, that women should not be discriminated against on the basis of their biological sex in the sports arena, in federally funded educational institutions. And the hashtag immediately that came up from the Women's Declaration people, WHRC, USA, Karadansky, they had this hashtag Biden erased women. So I would like to see hashtag IOC erased women, because it's something that we've already been using, like erased women. I think that's very, very effective in the way, because it's showing them that they're erasing us from our own category.
In Spain, we use it a lot, this concept, to erase women. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. And if I show you, like, it's for those
IOC means
International Olympic Committee, IOC, International Olympic Committee.
But for a hashtag, I think it's important that everybody understands what you're.
So, okay, so we could actually say hashtag Olympics erased women.
I think it's better. Because I think it's better. Joan Grant is asking. I cannot see you. Do you have your camera?
Okay, just while you're trying to get Joan in, can I just show you something?
Yeah.
So in the N=8, we have a logo. It looks like this.
Mm-hmm.
And what you see is the women behind that N=8. See that thing behind that is women. It's a W, but it's being scribbled out.
Yeah. Well, you have to.
And we have different colors. We have pink. We have different ones you can use, right, on the website. You can so we have blue, we have purple. Like, there's different ones we can use, like, to show the outrage and of what happened to women, and why the IOC, why the Olympic Committee, on what basis, on such a stupid study, allowed this policy to happen without any scientific, review, just like the World Rugby did a review. As soon as somebody reviews it officially, they realize their mistake.
I know, but I'm not sure about this as a sign, because nobody understands yet.
Well, in Canada and US, it's kind of like for the men, because we are doing it because men are kind of numerical. So basically that was like, so that men could put it on hats and pins without sort of having to say we support menstruators or something, so that's just for some people who are more numerical, and it's kind of like an inside joke. Yeah, N=8. Yeah, you erase women on the basis of 8 men. What?
Yeah. Okay, so Joan is can you give your question?
I suppose it's really more of a comment, basically, and I'm afraid to say it's I honestly think that women should have, they should have gone and possibly gone to the court of arbitration. I mean, I just honestly think that way past boycott. I personally think the legal route is the only way to get pressure on a body like the IOC, athletics, World Rugby, etc.
Yeah, very good point. Catherine Deves in Australia is actually, like I say, she's a lawyer, and she's very keen on the CEDAW, on the provisions in the international human rights. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that she has started down the pathway. There's some women that have started down the pathway of taking something to the courts, like the international arbitration for women. I'm going to have to look more into that, but I think that process is also beginning to happen, but it's a very good point.
Yeah, I'm afraid to have a second bite, but I mean, Caster Semenya, I know she's not actually trans, she's intersex or DSD or whatever, but she has got the support of her federation, and she's been to the Court of Arbitration for Sports, and it would appear that other women are not getting the support of their federations in any sport. And if had the support to go, if they had the support to go, and indeed the funding to go to the to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, you know, some of this would perhaps be rolled back. And I honestly think women have got to organise, fundraise and get a case, you know, in the Court of Arbitration for Sport.
I agree with you. I also have been confused as to why Semenya, even in that case, Semenya gets an entire posse of lawyers, including a Canadian lawyer who was arguing against Melissa Bishop, our own 800-meter runner. I mean, you know, the trial went the way it went, but I mean, even in terms of, you know, that's, you know, there's a lot of women obviously feel the empathy towards Semenya and because from birth thought she was a woman, but nevertheless, I mean, there was never an equivalent effort on the side of the biologically born women, female athletes, in anywhere near the amount of effort that was put into the Semenya case. I agree with that. That it just didn't happen. There was no effort in that sense.
No, and I'm sorry to be very greedy, but the other point to make is that there's hundreds now of these intersex athletes all popping up, all wanting to compete on the same grounds as she is. She is a man. Certainly the World Athletics know she's a man. They recognise she's a man.
Yeah,
she's XY, but they still won't take any effective action.
Right, and they're afraid. It's just all virtue signal. They're all afraid of just doing the right thing. We have very, very weak leadership in sport. This is what I've learned. We have, if I've learned nothing in the last 3 years of knowing about this problem, I have learned the fact that there's not a single coach in the world, for example, other than me speaking out, the fact that every time I talk to a sports leader of any kind of consequence, they're dismissive. The fear, the stupidity, the ability to sweep a woman's, specifically a female athlete issue, under the rug for the purpose of them being able to put up a flag and act like they're doing the right thing is just incredible to me. That we have such poor leaders in sport right now, it's incredible. Very corrupt.
I obviously would agree.
Yeah.
So is there anyone else who would like to ask a question to Linda? Because then I would conclude the interview. And,
I have a question.
Yay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Monique. Yes,
Hi, Monique.
I raised my hand before, but I thought the discussion was so interesting that I lowered my hand again. So
okay.
First, I'd like to say, Linda, I'm really impressed by what you're telling us and the work you've done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I haven't read the book yet since Caroline read the book, but it's amazing what you've been doing. So
thank you.
I think you need a statue. Yes, from the Netherlands.
Statue with my hand up.
Yes, yes, no, both
good.
hands.
Solidarity. Adelante. Yes. No,
we
it's really good. I mean, we need to keep doing it. Yeah.
Yes, but then my question is, I'm always interested in the public affairs side of issues and the governmental side, and also the side of follow the money. And I'm wondering what is happening and who is influencing whom, and what is the money, how's money involved? Maybe pharmacy or whatever. What is going on? Can you, do you have a clue?
You know what? Here's where I have to be very careful, because I have my suspicions and I have to be careful not to accuse somebody like the IOC about doing something. But I will tell you this. The corporations, so the International Olympic Committee has various sponsors. So most of their money comes from the corporate, you know, the sponsors who want to use the Olympic logo. And so they have the top tier of sponsors are there's 13 companies, as I understand it, that are the top what they call IOC partners. So the partners, in order to have a partner status, you have, I think these companies each contributed at minimum $100 million for the 4 years, each company, to the IOC. And so I was kind of asking your question 2 years ago, Monique, because I think you have a very, very good question. And I was looking at the different corporations that are the partners, and then I go into their website to see you know, how much, like, what is their status in terms of the trans ideology and the trans and the whatever the trans, you know, campaign.
Mhm.
And so there is one company that sort of stands out to me, is Procter and Gamble, which it's not a surprise. If you just go to Procter and Gamble, they are a big company that supports the Olympics. You know, they are the company that has all of the laundry detergents and so, like, the things women use.
Yes.
And yet, if you go to their website, you will see how much money they give to the Human Rights Campaign and ACLU in the States, and they're very much active in the rainbow people and the trans agenda. They're very, very strong. And I don't know, I think they would be very proud to say they've even put ads on television about a father, you know, I don't know, there's all kinds of things, you know, about what their ads are very trans inclusive. I think they would be very proud to admit that. Now, here's the question though. Was there something for them being also a partner? Was there some kind of influence there financially? I don't know that answer. I don't know, because we don't have access, because the International Olympic Committee is really not ultimately, they don't have to be transparent to the world, to the global population. They can do what they want, right? So they don't probably have to tell us if there was money that was being put aside to promote this particular policy. Who was it paid to? If it was, maybe there wasn't. I think, and of course, Jennifer Bielek of 11th Hour blog goes into this kind of thing a lot. But I guess I'm asking, I'm not asserting anything, I'm asking the questions. I'm just saying what I see. And I'm asking the questions. But, you know, this goes back to the analogy of the very well-dressed men standing at the door of the factory, hoping for the best products to come out so that they can make their money, because it's all about them making their billions of dollars, and they don't share it with the athletes anyway. And so it's a big money game, whether we like it or not. It's a big money game where the IOC they're running their corporation in partnership with a lot of other big billionaires and Fortune 500 companies. And we don't have access to that game. We don't know the game within the game. We don't know that. We can't know that. But that's a super great question. That's a super great question. And the fact that our journalists in the regular media are not asking those questions is incredible to me.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Maybe well, what I'm thinking about, what happened in the energy transition, where after all there was an institution that was paid by the oil sector in order to block the energy transition to renewables. So there was a very good documentary. Finally, it came out after 20 years. It was in public because some journalists kept on searching for what is going on here. Why is it happening? So indeed, in secret, this was the way they were blocking the transition.
But then they would then I would have to be interested in the position of women. And journalists don't seem to be very interested in the position of
that's
women
foundationally, fundamentally.
So
fundamentally, that's true.
So I think that's why there's not much attention for this, and the one who's are getting the attention are the trans athletes, and it's been told it's very good for them that they can join.
Oh, they are getting, you know, if you look at the amount of support in the United States of America, the Human Rights Campaign, for example, there's just these charts that I have seen. Now I have to find them again, where in the last 4 or 5 years, the amount of money to the LGBTQ cause, almost 95% of that funding now just goes to the T and doesn't go to anything else, just the T.
Yeah, I know. Linda, thank you enormously for your amount of work, your fight for this cause, because it's so important that somebody took the initiative to bring it all out. And deep thank you for your work on this issue, and thank you very much for coming today. And
I really enjoyed it.
And telling us all about it. We're going to put it on, try to put it on YouTube or something. And
sure.
So we're going to stop the interview now. En even kijken.